Welcome to the Heartwork podcast, where we delve into stories, struggles, and triumphs of entrepreneurship, leadership, and personal growth. I'm Dr. Sarah.
And I'm Dr. Marisa. We're here to guide practitioners, entrepreneurs, leaders, and those just navigating the complexities of life on a journey of discovery that explores the dance between passion and strategy, heart and hustle.
With candid conversations, insightful interviews, and plenty of laughs, get ready to uncover how leading with heart can transform your business and life. Let's dive in. Welcome back to another episode of the Heartwork podcast, where we are continuing our conversation of the story of Marisa selling her practice, along with the heart journey that she continues to go on. You guys are going to want to take a seat, buckle up. This is going to be amazing. It's also going to probably pull on your heartstrings. So we're excited for you guys to listen.
And so when I was just like, whoa, there's actually an offer here. That's wild. So I called my accountant and we talked some things through. It was definitely less than like the number that I had intended to. So the process was like, okay, obviously if I have a number and then someone else comes in and they brings me a lower number, like, do we meet in the middle? Do I stick with my number? Do I meet, 75% higher? Like, what do we go with that process? And we had suggested kind of like a meet in the middle place. And I felt comfortable with that because also I was like, great, if that's what I'm going to collect from them, and obviously I'm going to need to pay off my business loan, like what's actually left in our operating account, and do I get closer to my number, my freedom number, based off of just the profit that we've already made so far, plus what they're going to pay me? What does that look like? And it definitely kind of hit that mark. And so we met in the middle. We agreed on a number in November, right before Thanksgiving. So met them in October, had an offer verbally over the phone at the end of October, went back and forth and came to a conclusion by November. And so now you actually had to get the business lawyers involved. And so this is where it got tricky, because I had my lawyer that was looking out for my best interests, right? And they had their lawyer looking out for their best interests. And we agreed on a number, and that was it. What we didn't talk about was reconciliation of accounts. So because in our business, it's not just like a buy the product, receive the product. We care plan. And so there are people that pay in advance for 6 months, 9 months, a year, 18 months-ish of care, but they haven't necessarily rendered the services yet.
Right.
And so there are also people, though, that choose to pay like a monthly debit towards their care. And so typically they're coming in more frequently in the beginning of their care and then less frequently as time goes on. So they're actually rendering more services in the beginning and then less. So those accounts actually have quite a big balance. So kind of in our verbal discussion, it was like, well, hey, some people have prepaid for care. Some people are rendering a lot of care but haven't paid. So like, we'll call it even. Well, their accountant and lawyer did not like that process, because they're like, but how do you actually know? Which I understand. But when we actually did the reconciliation, like, it was an additional almost $40K I had to leave in the operating account that I was planning to have as part of like reaching that number. But at the end of the day, like, it was the most fair. I did speak with other practices and people that talked about how like they built it in where they were like, hey, we're going to leave an extra like 15K or 20K of operating expenses for you, so that if some people do leave and want refunds, like, you have some of that working capital, versus actually doing a reconciliation accounts, because I stayed up till 2:00 in the morning, too many nights to count, going through all of the accounts. Because at this point in November, like, we were serving probably 150 some people with patient visits that were starting to creep up into the 300s. And so that was a lot of accounts, and we were insurance.
Yeah.
So I had to account for payments that necessarily weren't coming in. Right. We didn't know if they would actually even be paid, right? There's no guarantee that just because insurance says that you have coverage, that they're actually going to pay for the services that they are rendering. And so now the practice member would be responsible for it. So it was kind of hard to try and figure out what that active care versus inactive care versus a wellness patient versus who prepaid versus who's paying monthly. And you also had to do that with an estimated like closing date of the sale, because I could calculate it for now, like at the end of November, mid-December. But if the state doesn't actually file all the paperwork to like mid-January, February, like that's going to all change.
Right.
So based on people's care plans, I had to do like calculations to the end of December, like what would we expect that they render? And so what does that look like? So it had to be an estimate because also too, just because they say that they're going to show up doesn't mean that they're going to actually show up and render the service. What if they get sick? What if they decide to take a vacation? What if they decide to take extra days off at the holidays? So it's kind of a nightmare. So if you can avoid doing a reconciliation and just leave working capital, I would highly suggest it. But their lawyers were not budging on the process. And so it was something that just, again, had to be done if this was the couple that I wanted to go forward with and sell the practice with. And at this point, already having felt kind of the like sinking feeling when that first couple didn't work out, I really did want to move forward. And so I was like, well, if this is the one, then I guess I'm just going to pull up my pig girl panties and like do what I got to do.
Yeah.
And so we kind of went back and forth a little bit, but got the final number with the reconciliation and everything sorted out. And right before Christmas, we basically signed the contract. So I keep talking about it a couple. It was an individual who was a chiropractor, and then his wife was going to be like the office manager. She was a fiance at the time. They weren't legally married, so everything was going to be put legally in his name. But there was talk about this, and this is something to consider if you are selling it. Like, not that I would ever pray that this happens to someone, but because he did a personal guarantee so that at least that we could have some sweat equity in of his own personal finances versus just his LLC that he built up. Because again, if he bankrupts the LLC or closes the LLC and he's protected individually, I lose out. And if even with his personal guarantee though, like if there was a process where he individually claimed bankruptcy and closed the business, but had transferred like assets of the business into her name, there's no record of her having any contract with me. And they weren't married at the time either. So this was kind of all like background stuff that I was just learning about and trying to figure out like with our lawyers and how to just best be protected. But at the end of the day, like as someone then who was going to be holding the seller's note, because that's ultimately what we did, as I was a new business owner, he was a very new, like he had been an associate, so he had never owned a business before and didn't have any of that process. He was in talks with other, companies and banks about getting loans for himself. And so it was just like, he couldn't come up with the total amount. And so it was like he could come up with a portion of it, but then he was going to have to pay it over time. And so we came up with a contract of a number, and he paid about like 60 to 75% upfront. And then the rest of it was going to be paid over 4 years at 4.5% interest rate. So it was a pretty low interest rate, but it just offered the opportunity for them again to just, I wanted them to be successful. I wanted them to be able to walk into the practice and be able to feel comfortable and afford it and grow it in the way that it deserved to be grown and continue to be cultivated, because I poured all of myself into this. And like, my blood, sweat, equity, and tears went into that building. And while I, yes, was following my heart somewhere else, that didn't mean that I wanted to see this crumble. I wanted to see it continue to thrive and flourish and continue to provide healing to people in our community and my family who would come there and see it and get care and experience it. So we kept it as a 4-year period at 4.5% to pay off the rest. So no prepayment penalty. Like if they wanted to pay me back the full amount sooner, great, go for it. Thank you so much. But if not, at least then there was some interest in that, because obviously selling it back in 2020 would have been a very different price than if I were selling it right now.
Right.
So once the contract was signed with that, you also have to be very like intentional. Like I had to do, a whole acquired assets and exclusions list. So everything that was going to be staying in the practice that was theirs, we had to like detail it out. Everything to like the picture frames in the rooms, like what is actually physically theirs? What are they physically buying? And also, are they buying any intellectual property? And they were. I was selling them the Altum brand. So my first practice was called Altum Chiropractic. I had a website. We had a social media following. We had a Facebook. I had scripts and training materials and articles that were written and different things that were all formulated and put together by me. And so in order for them to operate the practice, and their intention was not to rebrand it or do anything right away. They were going to wait until, potentially 6 months down the line or whatever, just kind of get people used to them, have the process be smooth and seamless, and then start the process of rebranding and moving it forward. So they were going to use all of those things to continue to push the brand forward that we had already established credibility in the community with. And we were running Facebook ads, so people were seeing those a lot. So we had to document it all, even to the extra bricks in the back break room that they didn't use in some of the build out. So it's a lot of work. We even put in things about, can my family get care? And if they get care, how much care can they get and for how long? Could that be built into the contract? I mean, you're talking about every little nitty gritty part of the process, and every single bit has to be documented, Excel spreadsheet. And the other interesting aspect of this was that I had a business loan in my name with collateral and a lien against my dad's house. So blessed to be able to have him support me in that way. But also in me, I was like, I cannot do this in a way that would ever come back and hurt him, hurt me, or any part of the process. And even for them to be able to buy my brand and buy my practice, I could not be attached to it in any capacity. So I had to pay off the full business loan to be able to actually have the name even transferred to them. So we needed to make sure that I got enough from them in that down payment and then had enough in the operating account to cover the business loan. Because I had to pay that off first. Then we would be able to file it with the state. In addition to that, there's also lawyer fees. And I had a lease with a landlord for 5 years. If you are going to sign a lease in a commercial or a retail space, whatever that looks like, medical office, please include a stipulation that allows you to sublease your space with approval of your landlord. So whether you can be there and sublease a room or whether you could sublease your whole square footage, have that be a stipulation in there, because if it wasn't, I'd be on the hook for rent for 5 years. And so in this process, I had to send my landlord an email and let them know, hey, this is what's going on. I have this turnkey doc that's going to come into my turnkey practice and continue to operate it and grow it in this way. But they then had to have a conversation, and they had to do a whole financial audit together and a credit check and make sure that the landlord would be even comfortable with leasing the space to this couple, because they went in contract with me and they had confidence and credibility in me and my journey and my story and my credibility. So that stuff just takes time along the way. So while we were discussing numbers and going back and forth on all this stuff, there were multiple moving parts that had no guarantee of working out either. So you're just kind of holding out faith and just kind of waiting a little bit for that to happen. And also remember, I'm still in secret. So we're coming up to Christmas and we finally signed the contract and the landlord approved everything and everything's going through. And now I actually have to own up to what I've done.
Merry Christmas, guys. I'm moving.
and share this process. And I think if I had initially started to have, or maybe felt like I had more support from the beginning, I would have let the people closest to me in on it sooner. But part of my shame and my guilt around building a dream for my family, that I would be home and I would be close, and having convinced them of this dream that I wanted, guys, I'm going to go to school in the Midwest for 4 years, leave you. But I'm going to learn and I'm going to grow. And I used to tell them about practices I would see, and nobody would believe me. They'd be like, what are you talking about? Until my mom came to Freedom and saw the way that you guys ran your practice and how beautiful it was. And she was like, I get it. Come all in with it, Mies. And I get emotional because my family believed in me and they trusted me. They invested in me. They supported me. They built things with me. They blessed the office with me. They wrote in the wood. They scraped words of wisdom and love and hope that this place would be successful and a place of healing, and that it would support me and a family one day. And to have to go back and tell them that I was leaving it was really hard. And I had a lot of guilt and I had a lot of shame. And none of these feelings are ever mutually exclusive. And I think if one thing we can leave with our audience is just like, you're allowed to be happy about something and sad about what it means at the same time. Like, you can feel the width of all of the emotions, and none of them are wrong, and they all have purpose. And it's something I still like. Heart work doesn't stop. It's something that clearly is still like a part of me, and I'm going to need to dive in deep a little bit about that because clearly I still carry some of that. But I think that it really just comes from a place of gratitude. Like gratitude, because not everyone has a family that supports them. Not everyone has people that cheers them on. And for as hard as it was for me to watch them, especially my mom be sad, angry, confused, hurt by the process, watching her struggle with that and feeling like sad about knowing that, I mean, I can't be in control of anyone else's emotions, but knowing that she was going through her own process of grieving the idea that her daughter would be here and establishing a business in the community and establishing a family in the community and getting to watch that and be a part of that in a close proximity in the same way that, you know, my grandparents, her parents built a business in the community and established a reputation and kept their family close, while also knowing that I wanted to do that. I just wanted to do that somewhere else was like there's just so many like heartstrings being pulled in different areas. And it's hard to like see someone else's process that's so close to you while also going through your own and understanding like that that's where you need to be, but also having empathy and compassion for that while also like knowing that it's going to be hard to rip the band-aid off, but you don't want to do it too soon. You didn't want to wait until you're moving tomorrow. Like I was just stuck. And I had actually let my sisters in on the conversations once we had agreed on the offer after Thanksgiving. And so they were kind of there just in support and like, when are you going to talk about this? Because at the same time, my grandfather passed away in 2019, the year before. So it was coming up to the year anniversary of that. And that was a really, really strong loss for our family. And so we were just going through grief of that. And so to add like me leaving now on top of it was just a different healing process and a different stack of the things. And so we went through Christmas. I didn't want to do it before the holiday or around his anniversary of his death. It was right after that, between Christmas and New Year's, that I kind of went over with my sisters for dinner one night and I shared it with my mom. And then I went to like home because I was living at my dad's and I shared it with my dad and his wife. And they knew because they saw me every day. I mean, regardless of the fact that I came home every night at 11 o'clock because I was working so hard in that business to make sure that it was as successful as it could be so that I could actually have something be measurable and big enough that someone would even want to buy it, even though we haven't even been open for that long. They saw me on the weekends. They saw my energy was just down. Like I wasn't the light that I normally was. I could put it on in practice and I could put it on when I needed to. But when I was out, like I was just, but then I would go to Iowa for a weekend and they would see me come back and they would see that light a little brighter. And so I think they kind of started to see it and know. And not for nothing, but my dad, he made a lot of choices in his life for his career. But he also made a lot of choices, putting his career on the back burner in growth ways for his family. Mm-hmm. And so I think he had a little bit more of an understanding of that with me. And so he was in a little bit more support than my mom, who had always worked with and for her family. And so that was, I mean, this is our Italian way. Like family comes first in everything, like family over everything. And there were a lot of things that were going on in the background with that side of the family. And so there were just a lot of moving parts. And so I just encourage anyone, like when you're going through your own process, you're allowed to let the people in that are in support of what you need. You're also allowed to create a boundary around it if it's something that you're not ready to be fully open with. A lot of business mentors and coach will share with you too. Sometimes when you are building something and building your dream, you actually want to keep it tight to the chest, because if you let too many people speak into you, you might start to falter on what that dream and that vision actually is. And so between, a couple, like I said, close mentors and someone that was helping me navigate my emotions around that, because it was just so big and it felt really heavy at times, while also feeling really light because, oh my gosh, like I just signed a contract. Holy shit. The state is going to file this within a month and I'm going to be able to move back to the Midwest. Like, it was wild. I remember telling Alex I was visiting here around Halloween and we went to dinner, and he had already kind of known, because obviously we have been navigating this relationship and figuring out what it looks like together, apart, all the ups and downs that come along with being together, not being together, the process. And I hadn't been sharing updates because the last update I had was that this other family wasn't going to be able to move down. And so while we thought that I might be able to sell it in mid-October, nothing was happening. Mm-hmm. And so I remember going to dinner, having gotten the offer that week, regardless if it would work out or not, just the fact that I got the offer. And I shared it with him, and I remember seeing his face. And I knew that I was going in the right direction. I knew I was making the right decision, and just like his light and my light, and like that time was just so full of love and energy. And I was like, I have never in my life ever imagined that I would put my heart over a business and over a career and a finance. But here I was doing it, and I don't regret it. And I think that's the measure of, again, me doing the heart work. And even though there is still emotion around the process, when you can feel still secure and settled in that, you've done enough of the work where you're in a good enough place to feel happy with the decision that you made and know it was the right decision, regardless of what continues to come down the future path and like the future pipeline. So once I told my family, it was also about telling my team. We were a rock star team. I had 3 incredible females working with me in that practice, and they were so bought into my mission, and they loved it. They loved it. They loved the girl power crew we had, the team culture that I had learned how to build and was building, and telling them was hard too. And they were shocked and surprised because, again, we were doing so well and things were moving so swiftly and so positively in our practice. But they knew, they had known about my travels to Iowa. They knew about my relationship. They knew about my heart and what was going on. It was just, they never thought I was actually going to ever do something about it. Yeah. And so I told them before our Christmas break. And so they had some time to kind of be out of the office and process it, because also now it was about time that I needed to tell the practice members. Right. So how do you do that with elegance and grace? Especially I just had some people sign on a week or 2 weeks ago. I didn't know when this process was going to happen. I just had to go into my business and operate with as much authenticity and integrity as I possibly could. Mm-hmm. Some people would look at that. And I had a couple practice members say, I literally just signed this care plan because I wanted to work with you. Right. I vibe with your energy. I vibe with what you're sharing with me that you can do. And now you're telling me not to, but you've known this process along. Why didn't you tell me? And I was like, but I didn't know. I have no idea of knowing. And I don't know if it's going to take 3 months for the state to process, 1 month for the state to process. I have no idea. But if you are selling, again, if it's a situation like this is different than if you're selling 20 years down the line, or you're selling to an associate who's already in your practice. These people didn't know me. Nobody knew. So what I decided to do in that Christmas break, that we were off from patient care, but I knew that our doc and his wife were going to come into the practice in January, because we figured what a beautiful opportunity while the state is processing this for you to come in and shadow and learn about where everything is located and see the systems, see how we operate. Because obviously you operated very similar in your other practice that you were working for, that was a sibling practice in its systems and procedures to us. But there's obviously nuances with every practice. Yeah. and ways that we communicate things that they don't communicate things and vice versa, or ways that we work with the accounts versus them. And so, how great would it be for you to be there and then also like spend a week or 2 weeks with me floating through the adjustment rooms, meeting people multiple times, because this is something you can speak to. It's like when you're bringing in a new associate or new person in your practice, like you want them to meet people 2, 3, 4 times before then they're solo in the room adjusting them by themselves. So there's a relationship, and it's not just like, I've been adjusted by Dr. Sarah for the last 4 years. Who are you? You know? So I had to let people know who these people were going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I felt that if I could share from my heart and they could see my face and my emotions, that would be the best way. So what I decided to do was record a video sharing a little bit the pieces that I wanted to show about what was going on in my heart, why I got led to this decision, and then the exciting news that came along with that, and why I trust this individual that I have been interviewing and working with for the last several months to come in to continue to run this practice, to build his own family in this practice, and continue to watch and see it thrive and grow. And so I recorded like probably about a 7 or 8-ish minute video. And then I actually asked the doc to record a minute or 2 of himself, introducing himself, like sharing about being excited to come down and meet everyone, so that they also got to like put a face to a name and also see his energy, and that like he is genuine and authentic and excited to be present. Like they're also walking into a complete unknown too. And they're investing in this business in the same way that I invested in it from the start. So we spliced the videos together, and then I downloaded a transcript of the video. And so I sent out the video on social media. So I posted it to our Altum page as like a post reel. Back then it was called like an IGTV. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do. Wow. Social media changes every day.
Literally. So I put it out there. At the same time that I posted it, I had sent the email with the transcripts and also referenced, like, if you have social media, please feel free to watch this video. And then I also sent out like a text message to our current patient base, letting them know to check their emails or that they may see this on social media. So I covered all the bases. So regardless of how people got in touch with us or knew about us, like, it was covered on socials, it was covered through an email, and it was covered through a text to let them know to reference their email. And I was floored by the responses. I mean, people are in such support, but I think when people see authentic hearts, they get it, because everyone has gone through something that's changed them, that they've made a decision about, that they felt at complete peace with. And while you may be upset, again, not mutually exclusive, to also celebrate the fact that that person is following their own heart and their own journey. So like, yes, people were sad and people were like, we're going to miss you so much. And that was so humbling and so gracious for me to read, while also saying, best of luck to you, and we wish you all the best. Thank you for helping us and changing our lives for the times that you were here. And like, what a beautiful, incredible thing for me to receive in response as I was getting ready to go. Also, in contrast to some of the things I was experiencing from close friends and close family. And sometimes the closest people to you are the harshest critics, but not for nothing. Like, they also were like, you see this successful thing. Why do you want to sell it? You have no guarantee that a relationship will work out or that another practice will be just as successful. It's a completely different economic climate. It's a completely different clientele than your South Jersey near Philadelphia clientele is. Why are you crazy? Where's the effort from that person? Where's the effort from that life? You've put all your effort here. What do you mean? So like, you're working through a lot of things, not only within yourself, but from the opinions of other people. And when you're selling a practice, whether it's just because you're moving on in life or wanting to retire or wanting to do something different, there's a lot of different reasons people may choose to sell their businesses, their practices, whatever. But you'd be surprised sometimes the things that you hear in response. So having that response from my practice members was just like such a beautiful process. So our new doctor ended up coming in that second week of January. So I basically had like a week where it was just me and the team so that we could just talk openly, freely, share, do the hugs, do the cries, like have it. And then him and his fiance came in that second week and just, again, he stayed with me and shadowed and she stayed with the team. And we kind of continued to work through like where things were located, what the process was. And then that third week in January, we started like transferring some roles. So like she would do more front desk stuff. My team really transitioned into more of just like the patient care management side of things. And then he really was in the adjustment rooms with me, entering in notes and doing different stuff. And then we ended up signing it at the end of that third week. And I offered a week where I stayed. So I was no longer providing patient care. He was in the process of getting like insurance transferred over and all of those kind of behind the scenes things that you have to do in general. But I just stayed to be present. So if his wife needed help, because obviously he was just doing the clinical side, but his wife was doing all the admin. Well, I was one person. I was doing clinical and admin. So like, I was like, I'm here to help you facilitate this process and do whatever you need to. Use me as a resource. If you don't need me, great. But like, I'm just letting you know I'm here. And so it was fun. I was able to, say a couple more goodbyes and do that process. And then literally that Friday, I had packed up my car with a couple things and I went out to Iowa to get my apartment key because that was also something that was going on in the background as I was looking at apartments when I would go visit and stuff like that, and got my key, started to move things in. And then right before Valentine's Day, my dad and my sister and Alex, he flew out to Jersey and we drove the U-Haul in my car out to Iowa and moved me in. And that was that. And it was done. And now we're actually coming up to the 4th year anniversary of me selling it, and I'll no longer hold the seller's note. And so I've actually been processing some things about the complete ending of that process. So there are, it doesn't just stop with you signing on the dotted line. Like, clearly, as you guys could all hear and see a window in my heart today, I really had to do a lot of work on making sure that as I've grown and changed so much, and I am a completely different person now than I was back then, in the sense of how much self-awareness I have, how much understanding of my heart has expanded and opened, making sure that like I continue to evaluate those feelings if they do come up and where are they coming from. I have a beautiful practice now and it's a slightly different practice and it's incredible. And I have beautiful team members with me with beautiful hearts themselves. And I'm married with my husband and our dog, and we want to start a family next year. And like life is unfolding beautifully and it worked out for me. And I think it worked out because of the work that I was doing along the way. Because if I wasn't doing that work, there could have been a lot of resentment. There could have been a lot of change. I could have been an emotionally less healthy person that was walking into that relationship after having left family and left home.
Yeah.
So I just encourage you, regardless of what's going on in your life, but especially when there's a huge life transition, go deep.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah, you were the one that was like, you're starting to talk some big life moves right now. Like you.
I would invite you to talk to somebody that I would really recommend.
Yeah. But thank God you did. Yeah. Thank God you did. Mm-hmm. And that's what's led us to where we are today. Yeah. So we really, you got a lot of business stuff, but you got a lot of the story of what this process was like from, again, just more of a Heartwork standpoint. There's a million people that can talk to you about the process of, putting numbers together and what that looks like. But don't forget about the person that stands behind those and the heart of that person and the place that you're making those decisions and those metrics from. Like,
I think at the end of the day, that's part of the reason why we started this, right? Where it's like you can create systems and do numbers, but at the end of the day, like who's the individual behind it and what's your heart talking to you about? And
absolutely.
I am so freaking honored to relive that story with you today. You pulled on my heartstrings. I know everybody else as they listen to this is just going to be so just drawn in to that story. And I loved how you said it's okay to feel the width of every emotion, whether it be so much celebration or a lot of grief and sadness at the same time. And I think that's so evident in just life. Like you think about, like I'm looking out my window right now, like it's winter currently in this season. However, it's shining and there's still like sunlight out there and like you can still see so much celebration, but yet a lot of the things are quote unquote leaves are falling. It's getting quieter out. There's a lot of like dying off of things to be able to rebuild and regrow and have celebration. And so I think there is time for both of them to really intermix. You don't have to just be in one versus the other type of emotion. And so that was just beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing your heart along with the process of obviously selling a business. I know for me, I'm so proud to know you as a friend and so proud to know you as a business owner and leader, to have navigated that space so eloquently with high integrity and character, to be able to now see where you are with your beautiful husband and your family, to like see how much your family supports you now and is just in celebration of that. And like, it's just remarkable to know that when you lead from that space, things can drastically and dramatically change.
100%. I think that's another aspect of an interesting part of it, because at the end of the day, like, the person that's the most responsible for your heart is you.
Yes.
And if you do make your decisions for other people, if I did decide to stay for my family or for the business and the people I was caring for, that's me leveraging my heart for them and for their life, which I have zero control over how will turn out.
Right.
I have no idea if my sisters are going to live in New Jersey forever. One doesn't. One, she lives in New York. I have no idea if my mom is going to buy a flat in Italy and continue to do her Carla Severino tours and like live her best life out there, what that's going to look like. My dad's already a snowbird. He's in Florida now for half the year. So like, if I had leveraged my heart, hoping that they were the ones that were going to take care of it because I stayed, what would that have turned me into if I wasn't doing work? And then on top of it, I put, again, myself on the chopping block, thinking that everything else was going to stay the same.
Right.
So just remember that, like, you get to take care of you.
Yeah.
And that's an incredible responsibility, but it's a beautiful one. So make sure that you're listening to you as well, you know?
Well, thank you all for listening. I hope this was an amazing episode for you and it really leaned into pieces of your heart that you may not necessarily have thought you would have touched today, thinking about listening to an episode about selling a practice. So if you guys love what you hear, please subscribe, follow, rate us, share it with your friends, and we look forward to chatting with you guys next time.
Bye.